Okay, anyone wants to share what kind of app we're gonna be building today? Maybe at a high level, how does it work? What is this app about, and how is it uh, displaying information? Dog API using lifecycle methods. Okay, how do we? Maybe like if you could expand a little bit more on how that's being done.
We'll use a lifecycle method to make a networking call that will set the state and give us what we need when networking call functions.
Right. Yes, that's correct. So, did everyone hear that? We're gonna use a lifecycle method that will. So we're gonna have a component. That component will have a lifecycle method that will fire a network request to retrieve information from the dog API. Um, the dog API returns image URLs that then will be used by that component to display the image of a dog um, on our app. Cool. So we could do for this. You could use Code Sandbox if you want to like follow along. I'm gonna install it locally, so I'm gonna use. Remember that now we don't install Create React App globally. We're gonna be using npx Create React App. Create React App, or the developers of the Create React App, recently disabled support for local installations, global local installations. So we now have to do it through npx. So I'm going to run npx create react app. Oh, I forgot the name of the app. I'm going to call it React Networking. And this will create a React app for us. If you do on Code Sandbox, which is fine as well, you don't have to run this. What link? No. Like here, you mean on VS Code?
No, on the
What linter?
Yeah.
Um,
color
oh, the coloring.
Yeah.
That is something called. So it's two things: is the Z shell and the Oh My Z shell. Yeah, like you can do. This is the shell that I use, and there's a package called Oh My Z shell.
Oh.
So in this case, so we're gonna have a component that we want this component to show the image of a dog here. And I have to draw a dog, so we're gonna have a button here. So everyone just create a component that shows an image and a button. On your project, create a component that shows an image and a button. For now, maybe hard code an image URL there. I also have a header that says random dot pictures v1. Just share the VS Code link so that you can connect. Okay, so for this component that I asked you to write, what did you create a functional component or a class component? Raise your hand if you did class component. Okay. So I guess the rest did functional component. And what was the criteria for picking? Or maybe you didn't pick. Maybe you just wrote the first one that came to mind. But did anyone have like thought about, do I want a functional or do I want a class? And maybe what was the thought process through that? Yes, Hugo.
Usually, like when I use like a class version, it's usually for something that is gonna handle actions made by other components,
Mm-hmm.
and like usually like the smaller components that like render one thing would be like a functional component.
Right, that's correct. So we went. So we went class components for two reasons. One of which Hugo stated, which is like handling the actions that the user creates by interacting with a page. And so for when we run a class component when we want state. And this one is sort of like very tied to what you said, Hugo, about handling user interaction, handling user actions, handling events that will modify the state, right? And functional components are mainly for just displaying. They don't handle, they don't have state, they can't have state, they don't handle events or anything like that by themselves. And for this particular like example, if you did a functional component that's okay, because in this case this is just displaying. I didn't say anything about how the button was going to work or how we're going to get the image dynamically. But with this, like if we keep that functional component, we can't make the network request. We won't be able to make, if we have, I guess like let's do, for this, how many components should we have for like building this small app? What do you think? 2, maybe 3. Jonathan, why do you say 2? Which one, like what would be the name of those 2 components?
Just the one that we're using now, which is the image component, and then maybe the app component.
So you said app, and which one's the other one?
The image component, the one that we're using now to display the picture.
So Jonathan suggests like basically having 2 components, one main component app, which has one child, which will be the image. And this is fine. People, you said 3. What was the third one?
One for the button.
I see. So it will be something like app and then another component, another child of app for the button. Something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. This will be okay, but generally we want components to be a bit bigger than just one thing. So like just having an entire component for an image, it's just an unnecessary file basically, right? Like because the image component is literally just going to be an image tag itself, right? What else would we put in the image component? And a button component will be literally just the button tag. And note also that I'm going to be referring to components, so these React files that are class or functional, and to these to the built-in ones I refer to them as just tags, HTML tags. So I wouldn't say that an image tag is an image component, even though depending on the context that might be acceptable. But in general here, when I'm referring to component, I'm referring to a JSX file that is either a function or a class that is building a piece of user interface. that will generally be one or two or like a few HTML tags inside, not just one. So again, like, this will be fine. It will be just like these very tiny files that we could that are not really needed. So for this example, let's just go with basically just one component, app. App will have an image tag and a button tag. And that's it. Who would like to write that component? Who would like to write that on my VS Code? So we want just app to have an image tag with an image from a dog image from the internet and a button. Who wants to type it? Or just copy and paste it from the one you wrote? Cameron?
So we want to import first, so it's not import dog from where we have the location. So
You're saying here at the top, import dog?
yeah, we're in JS, right?
Yeah, we're in app.js.
Sure. Oh, you want me to write? Okay.
Yeah, but actually, so in the lesson we have this. We have app, which is a functional component, and just another component that is dog. I'm saying let's just take our dog component, just being app, because this is such a tiny app that why have two components? So basically, just sort of writing the dog component in app itself. Yeah, so Cameron, if you could go in like app.js and add the image and the button, basically. Are you're connected? Oh, I don't think you're connected. Cool, so let me just do this one. We need an image tag. We need a source, and we will need an alt attributes and a button. New dog. Cool, let's grab an image from the internet. Dog, sure. Open image. Address. Let's do this here. Alt. Oops. Copy the image URL here, and alt just dog. Cool. We save, and we have this. Cool. Say that again. I'm just hard coding the image right now. Yes. Any questions up until this point? Was everyone able to get a button and an image showing up in your React app? Cool. Yes.
Should I still haven't broken up into a component for this. Should I truncate it and make it just simply like you're doing for now and follow up? Or should I go on with like that?
It doesn't really matter. I think, yeah, it doesn't really matter. As long as you realize that what I'm writing here as app will be our dog, yeah, it's fine. Cool. Okay, so now we come to like, know that I wrote this, or I just went with the default, which is function, our app being a functional component. But then now we're thinking, we want, when we click this button, we want to get a new image from the dog API. So what is the thing that we need to do when we want something to happen when a button is clicked? On click, and what are those called in general? Event listeners. So So we want to attach an event listener to this button. So we could do something like on click, and let's say on click, and let's say we have a function called get dog picture. We're going to see that we can't really make this network request in a functional component, but I want us to sort of realize that. So here I'm going to define a function const get dog picture that is going to make an Axios request or a network request. More, I will say a network request is better. Now, sort of as a refresher on Axios, how do we make a network request with Axios? What's Axios? Who can say what's Axios first of all? Lewis?
You're trying, and it's promise based, so
Definitely
it's got to be
promise-based.
asynchronous.
Say that one more time.
It's promise based, so it needs to be it makes an asynchronous request.
What kind of asynchronous request?
Async await.
No. What kind of request is Axios allows to do? HTTP request.
Oh.
Let's do async HTTP request. Yep. Yeah, like we're using .then and .catch, but I wanted to spend a little bit more time here. Axios is a library. It's a third-party package that somebody else wrote. Probably dozens of other developers have collaborated it because it's open source. And more specifically, or I think the definition that they have in the website is Axios is an HTTP client. It's a HTTP promise-based client. What that means is basically what we described here. It allows you to make network requests, HTTP requests, and it lets you handle them with promises, which is really handy. So I think, yeah, it lets you do HTTP requests. And you want to be, in general, you just want to be familiar with the code that you use, just so at least being able to tell what they are and how to use them specifically. So Axios is promise-based HTTP request library, HTTP client, those are all interchangeable. That means it lets you make network requests to get resources from the internet through the HTTP protocol. And how do we use Axios? Axios has like a camera to it. Yes, Joanne?
Well, you have to import Axios first, and then you need a sync and wait.
We'll need to like import Axios. You said async await, or actually, like maybe yes, this is correct. And we went, so there's this. I have said it when we were on Unit 2 with promises in general. There are two ways to handle promises. Which one is .then .catch and async await with try catch blocks. Those are two ways in which you can handle them. Let's see here. Quick. So let's say Okay, anyone would like to come up here and write the function to get the dog picture, like on the board, with Axios. Which if you saw it in the lecture notes, you can just and write that same thing. Imagine we have like a variable. Imagine we have some let dog API URL. Where this is a URL to the dog API. How do we write this function using Axios? Just to make an error request. Yeah, you want to come up? Are you going to use, and you tell us.
I'm going to set this equal to the.
No, so imagine you're just given this. You have the dog API URL here. So you don't have to care about the specific URL. Maybe walk us through what you're writing.
So, Axios, so you make the HTTP request, that get specifies the URL that you're using. And then this is what you do when the request is successful. You use object destructuring to get the data and get the message from the data. And this is used as an input in the callback function. Inside of the callback function.
So you're just going to console log the message.
Console log it?
Yeah.
And then we have our dot catch. If it doesn't work out,
What would be some like instance where it wouldn't work out?
not connected to the internet.
The main reasons why the network request could fail. We're not connected to the internet, or maybe the server is down, maybe the server is overloaded, etc.
Console log. Error.
Cool, thank you. Any questions about this code? This might be a bit confusing, we can get to there. Well, basically, this is the pattern in which you can handle any asynchronous behavior. Then and catch. We use get because that's the kind of request that we want to do. We don't want to make a push request, a push request, or a delete request. We want to make a get request to this URL. And it's important to remember that this thing here, this Axios.get returns a promise. To that promise, you do that then, so that this callback that Michael wrote here, from here to here, gets called if the promise is solved successfully. If the promise rejects or doesn't work out, the callback that is in the catch statement is the one that will be called. In this case, console logging error. Cool. Let's write this one. So let's say we have let's say dog API URL. We're gonna get that next, and let's do Axios.get dog API URL. then catch. Also remember that when you're writing these callback functions to that then and that catch, in here you get the response for the that then, and the catch you get the error. Let's say here I'm gonna console log response data, and here I'm gonna console log console log error. Oh. Cool. So we have some basic piece of code that will make a network request using Axios. As Joanne mentioned, we need to install Axios and import it. So let's try to import Axios from Axios. And we get this errors, module not found. We get that because we haven't installed Axios, right? So let's try to install Axios. Kill this, npm install Axios. If you are on the code sandbox, on the left bar, there is a way in which you can install. Let's do code sandbox. In which you can install Axios under a dependencies navigation bar. Let me show you here quickly. If you go here to like the file section on our code sandbox, you will see this button. If you scroll down, maybe you need to scroll down a little bit. You'll see dependencies, and you can click add dependency and type in here Axios. And then that will install Axios for you on code sandbox. And you can install I don't know of any module that you can't install this way. Maybe Express you wouldn't be able to, but we wouldn't do Express stuff on Code Sandbox. So that's how you get it. That will be the equivalent to npm install Axios on Code Sandbox. Cool. So I install that. Let me run the app again. Cool. So here we then have the problem of, well, how do we, well, actually, let's see if this works. I'm going to reduce the zoom a little bit. We have this function get.picture that we have attached to an onClick on the new doc. So let's see if I go to the console and I click the button, see if we actually get something. Oh, I forgot I forgot to set the URL here. So let's bring in the URL for this. Let's go to the dog API documentation. This seems to be the URL to get a random dog. So I'm just gonna copy that and put it in here. Cool. And then let's see if this works. So I have new dog. I click the button and I got a success message with a URL. So maybe if I click on, we will get, oops. And if, let's say if I click it again, do we get another picture? Yeah, so here we're getting these URLs that then we're gonna use on our network request. Cool. So we see that the button is working, but then we have the problem of how do we get this URL into the image source attribute. This button, we click on the button, we get a dog picture, but the problem is how do we get that URL for that dog picture in the source of our image tag. Joanne? We can't really use this because we're in a function. So we don't have a class. Yeah.
Can we set source equal to not like let's set the ITO score to something replacing like that. Image URL equal ITO.
I think that might work, but then we will have a slower app because it will wait for the network request to succeed before it shows anything. So, I'm not sure if we want to go there since, yeah, no, I'll say try it out, see if it works, but I don't want to like go there just because this problem that we're facing currently is going to be solved by state. That's why we use state. We use state for information that is going to change over time and affects our UI. Yeah.
We just give it to the dog one and have it up to the state there.
Right, that's correct. But in this case, remember that our dog or like my dog component is going to be app.
Also, you're not using it.
I'm not using like the dog component, but that is just because we have just one component. We don't need two. So basically, everything that I'm doing that I'm going to do in app is what in the lecture we had in dog. Yeah. So we're going to need a class to use state. We're going to need a class to use state. And why is that going to work? Thank you, Joy. Yeah.
Every time we update the stage,
Every time we update the state, it will re-render. And that's what we want. We want when the network request succeeds to display a new image. So Joy is like converting this to a class component, which I appreciate. So what are the changes that we need to do? So he did class here. Hupel is writing the constructor. Good question. We need a constructor only if we're going to use state. Which for class components, we mostly have a class. You will have a class component because you need state or you want state, or because you want to use lifecycle methods. Cool. So we have we have a constructor with some state that is going to start as an empty string, that's fine, and a property URL. We have now our function, which is a method of the class now, and we now have a render function. Let's save this. Let's see if anything changed. So as I save, now we get this error. Get doc picture is not defined. We get this error because before we were in a function, and our get doc picture was a variable in that function. Now this function is inside of the class, so we need to do this .get doc picture here, as somebody just added. Let's save that, and cool. So we get our dog. Oops. We get our dog. We click the button, and we are getting network requests. Cool. So let's see. Cool. So hold on there. Now we converted this to a class component. Everything works exactly the same. We converted it because we want state. Because when we get this URL, we want to save it to state. And every time we get a new URL, because setting the state makes the component re-render, therefore we're going to show a different image every time. So before we get to do that, any questions up until this point about how we get from a functional component to a class component and any other behavior that we currently have? I mean?
It's a question about access. Is there a way to do it without translating it? Like before we just do scripts? We used to do script in HTML.
Wait, I think I don't understand the question.
Before React, I used to just import it like as a script with the name
I see.
HTML file without installing it. So is there a way to do it?
That's correct. So Amin is asking, like, would the old way of importing Axios work with a script tag in the HTML? And the answer is yes. It's just generally not done that way with React. You could just go, like, if you notice here, we have an HTML file, I think it's in the public folder. You could add it there for Axios, and then you could use it. It will be globally available. It didn't work. Then I'm willing to look into the details. I think it should work. However, you don't want to do that generally because you want to keep track. You want to keep track of what code your code depends on a single place, and that will be the package.json file. So if you have your Axios like in the HTML and you have maybe another library that we import on your package.json, then now you have to keep track of your dependencies sort of in two places: the script tags and the package.json. Also, if we think about like what React is doing, React is grabbing all your code, including all your dependencies, and is packaging them into a few JavaScript files. So that's why we say like this error, for instance, failed to compile. Compiling in React terms is all your code is being taken, and we're writing, for the most part, we write like ES6 JavaScript here, and we might even use features that or React allows to use features that may not be available on all browsers. But with this compilation process that React is doing under the hood for us, all this code gets turned into ES5 code. All the code that we're writing, that is like all those classes, all those ES6 functions, they get turned into ES5 code because that's the most compatible across browsers. And not only in the compilation process, the code gets turned into ES5 code, it also takes in all your dependencies, and it outputs like, I think it's like 5 files. And all the code combined into just 5 files of your application once you compile it. Once we get to deploying, we're going to see more of that. Once we want to deploy our apps, we're actually going to see the output, and we're going to see that our code will look like garbage after the compilation process, but everything will be there. Cool, so going back here, let's do, okay, let me actually just get up to date because there were some changes in here. So let's see this error, unexpected token. I think I have typing this here. So then let's maybe, I think, oh Michael, this was you, right? Let's start with the one on the network request. So from this I'm gonna do URL this dot state, and then here this dot get dot picture.
I have a question that
Yeah.
overdo my
Yep.
can you import the state? Like it's maybe that's too good. I just don't get
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Can you import the state from a component that is a class component? Because can you import the state of the root or the app component
Mhm.
on a secondary component?
The short answer is no. It will be about like, why do you want to do that? The way, or I guess like I'm gonna change the way in which you're referring to import will sound like passing the state of a parent component as props to a child component. That you can do, but it's very rare. Like the use cases for that are very rarely desired. But yeah.
But the props can be taken by a class component also?
Yeah, props can be taken by any component. Mhm. Yep. For the class component, you have access to the props in this.props. If you console log this.props on a class component, you will see the props that are being passed to
And
it.
that goes in super.
You could put them in the super if you need them like at constructor time. Whenever you want them whenever the component is constructed, you can put them in the constructor. Yeah.
Okay, that's the part that I'm getting. That I'm getting.
Cool. Let me know if you have a use case and we could look at it. Mm-hmm. Cool. So going back here, we have. Wait, I think this is going. Some people are doing Command Z. So right now we have this button that works. We see the console logs of the network request succeeded. If we go to the network tab, we should also see network activity happen as I click and be able to see, I think, the response, and that's cool. And now we have our image broken. We have our image broken because from here, if we look at the image source that we're using here, this URL that comes from state is currently just an empty string. Cool, so, okay, and here we have sort of like an initial state. For this initial state, I wouldn't really use initial state if it's just like 1 or 2 properties to start with. I'll just define it like here straight, basically. So let me convert this back. I also wouldn't have like an initial state if I don't plan to go back to that initial state at some later point. It's fine if you do it that way, but it's generally like you will want an initial state generally when you want to go back to that initial state under some condition, and maybe you have more than 3 properties in there that you want to go back to, sort of reset at some point later on. Cool. So I think we have this. Now, we have here a set state. So let's look at this thing that Michael did here, which is curly brackets or parentheses, curly brackets, this structure in the data. So do you remember how we can do like this here? From URL, we're interested in the URL. This will define a variable URL that is a property of this dot state. So it turns out that we could do that anywhere in our JavaScript code. We can destructure any object. So here, what Michael remember is that here initially I had response. So let's see maybe these two. Let's see. Here, this is what I had originally. Response. And let's say we're going to console log response. Remember that if we have just one argument, we don't need. We won't need the. Let's console log. Remember this. So let's go back here. Console. See, we get that data. Cool. So here, this is how we might have been doing it for the most part with just response here. And if we look at the response, this is actually a bunch of big object that has configuration, data, headers, request. This is basically the response that Axios gives you. But from that, you're only interested actually, or you're mostly interested most of the time, you're interested in the data property that has your data. So what you could do is this structure in the argument itself to have that, to not have to do, if you're interested in the response.data, you could do response.data, right? And if this is the most comfortable way, just go with it. But in this case, we're interested in the data property of the response. But something we could do is just destructure the data property here in the argument itself. For destructuring, then we will need the parentheses. And we destructure in the same way we do like with the state. Just curly brackets, data. And in this case, then we are able to get rid of response dot. And when I click in new dog, we still get the same thing. We still get the data. So just whenever, and you might see this like in tutorials online as well. Whenever you see these, just think, oh, what is coming in here is an object that has a property data. And we're just destructuring in the arguments directly. So you can do something like this for destructuring data when we console log data. Here, and in this example here that, oops, let me not comment this. In this example, get rid of this. Oh, somebody. So in this example, we're destructuring data, and data is this object that came from the API, a message and a status success. But from this, maybe you're even like more interested just in the message. You don't care about the status. So you could just keep this structuring as we see in this example here. That I think Cameron is hovering over. We destructure first the data like this, and then from the data, I'm interested in the message property of the data. I'll do like, put it up in this here. What that allows us to do is that then data becomes, let's do console log data. Oh, this is interesting. I thought this will become a variable as well. I guess it doesn't become a variable. But in this, oh, you will have to do like data equal. But okay, the point is that you can just keep this structuring. I feel like at some point this structuring is not the most readable here. Here I have to think that message is a property of data, which is a property of the response. So I generally don't just structure more than like one level deep in one go. But if you feel comfortable doing that, it's fine. It's fine if you do. But this is just so this structuring the response first. The response has a data property, and then the data property has a message property that you're interested in, and you're sort of unwrapping this sort of onion basically by doing these curly brackets like that. Cool. So I'm gonna go with this one with just one destructuring of the data here. And cool, once we have this, once we know that this data is, let me comment out this. Once we know that the data property of the response is this object, this JSON.arrive that has two properties, message and status, in here we just see that this is the URL that has the image. That's the URL that we're interested in. So what we do in this case is just set that to the state, as one of our team members wrote here. Just save data.message, save it to the state in the URL property of the state. As we do that, now once we click the button, we get a dog popping up. Let's redo the zoom a little bit. I click it again, and every time we get a dog, a new dog. That is because every time we click the button, we're making the network request, we get that data from the API, we receive a new URL, we set that URL to be in state, setting the state causes a render to happen again. Render now will use the new URL to be passed to the image source attribute, and we get this behavior so far. Any questions up until this point about the network request, the image in general, setting the state? Yes, do
I
this.
feel like we may be getting there, but on initial site load, it still doesn't. It's not like it doesn't have. It has a broken image.
That's our next step. Cool. But any questions so far about how this is working? Yes, Owen.
You don't have like more access, you have to do anything outside of the module or number.
Only importing Axios and just using it. Yeah, nothing else. Peter.
Can you re-explain the part where in .NET you had data called message? Because I'm trying to like duplicate it.
Yeah.
Because I understand the way you have it now, but I tried to do it like one layer deeper, like you just had it.
It will be like this. Let me comment this one out. So data is this property, and from this object, because data is an object itself, we could destructure message. And I think the way that I look at this is, yeah, sort of like unwrapping an onion, where the layers are sort of determined by these curly brackets, and you're getting to the core.
I didn't have the second set of
Yep.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions about how this is working in general? Yes, Owen.
Is it like the same async await?
Cool. Actually, yeah, let's do that next. Do you want to try to convert this one to async await? Okay. Yeah. Go for it. Go for it here, and then I could guide you wherever. So let's convert this to async await. Let's have Owen do it. and we can help him as we're doing. So thank you, Michael, for copying the other way. So so you can just go in this one, the get doc picture, the one that is not commented, and start converting that to async await. Oh, actually, the one that's not commented, the one on top of that. Yeah, this one. So and maybe tell us what you're doing.
I'm just doing like a try and catch thing because
Okay, yeah. So you have a try catch.
make like a variable to pull the data that we fetch.
Yeah, that's correct. What would you call this? Response, that's a good name. It's looking good. Got it. Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of this Axios all stuff, but cool. Yeah, so we need a wait. Important to have a wait async that you just added, and this is pretty much it. You have like a syntax error on the catch statement. Cool. Okay. Cool, I think that's it. Anybody has any comments or questions about this code? Let's try it out. Cool, it works just like the other one. I think I had a question here. Async and await with try catch. Here, just or any questions or comments about this? Yeah.
I'm missing something on mine that isn't making it work. I'm not sure what it is.
What error are you getting?
I'm not getting any error. It's just not changing the image. It's kind of showing up in the console. In stage or
Let me take a look. check your render. Cool. So, any other questions or comments? So here we can see the same thing that we saw earlier about like this structure in it. We can do this. Actually, like this is being done like in one, where same thing, like this structure, we know that this is gonna give us a response. We know that the response has a data property, so we destructure that first. And then we know that the data property has a message property that we're interested in, so we destructure that as well, and we can just do this dots message. So, this saves two lines of code. At some point, though, I do think that this becomes a little bit harder to read on what's going on.
I think it would become useful if you have a lot of code and you forget to write this.
Mm-hmm.
We structure everything. All we gotta do is worry about writing the variable.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's definitely a valid option. I think my fear with that will be that maybe then I forget that I'm inside of that I'm inside of a class, and then I'll have to find that out. Yeah. I think it has its pros and cons. I'll say use it if you're comfortable with. Here, I guess like the mixture that I will do this with will be something like this. Let me remove this. It'll be something like this. I know that the response object has a data property, so I'll destructure just the data. And that gets me rid of this. And then here I'll just do console log data if we want to console log it, and just data that message. And if we go back to our code, this works exactly the same way. Cool. Any questions, comments before we get to how do we have it as soon as the component mounts, basically fetch the image? Yes. Cool. Do you know write that? Maybe just right here before, actually here between the constructor and the get.picture. So what we want to do is when the app first loads, we want to display a dog photo instead of displaying a broken image, which is currently what we have. If we go here, currently the first thing that we're showing to the user is a broken image, which is not a good experience, a good user experience. Then Vonil here wrote the component didn't mount function that the only thing that it does is just get the dog picture, basically. And we know that componented mount is a function that always gets called whenever this particular component app is mounted. So as I save that, our app refreshes, component mounts, and we have a photo automatically. As I want to refresh again, we get a photo automatically. So this is one of the most common uses for componented mount, to have stuff happen when the component literally mounts, displays. Cool. Oh, somebody moved. Oh, I guess yeah. The button at the top and the image. Cool. So take some time to look at this code. Let me compare it with yours. If you have any comments, questions, just raise your hand. Yep.
Can you show us the componented mounts again?
Yep. This is a warning that is a warning for the dog API, that they should implement something that's called sync sounds. So we can let's take a 5-minute break as well. And then reconvene.
At the component. Expected. Expression.
follow like whoever's like when you type. So, like whenever you type, it like makes it like go all over the place.
I think you have to, or maybe here. Live share. I think you have to click on no. Wait, I guess let me see.
I think it's because you're following me. I mean, yeah, that's 1.6.
Cool. Questions, comments, thoughts about what we have seen and done so far? Okay, so let's say the next step, what we want is, now we want to have a select box to be able to select for a breed and get a random dog of that breed that we selected. Instead of, right now we're getting a random dog from a random breed. Let's say we want to have a select next to the button to have a dog by whatever breed was selected. So we have something like, the select box here. So let's say we want to have a select box that has all the breeds in it. And when you open this, you get all the breeds that are available on the dog API. And then you select a breed, let's say you select Bulldog, and then immediately after you select Bulldog, a new photo of a Bulldog will appear. And then when you click on New Dog, you get another Bulldog picture. So how would we go about doing something like that? Yep.
Well, first we'll have to kind of either make another request or edit our current request to get like, all of the dog breeds.
Okay, so we need how to get all dog breeds. And Hugo, you're saying we need to make another network request for that, right? And that's correct. Let's do next. Okay. What would it? Yep.
You then want to loop over what it returns, and then put each one of those individual breeds into a different select or option.
I see.
For select box.
So basically, we went for each breed, create an option element, right? An option tag.
Right.
Yes. Cool. So I guess let's do yes.
I'm just thinking ahead, like for this, we have to like make a state for the options, like a abstract of all the options.
That's correct. We're gonna need to save all these breeds somewhere. They're going to change. This is a good point. We only need to get them once, and after we get them, they're not going to change over time. But let's start just put it in the state overall, and then we can see how we can put them somewhere else, because they're not going to change in the way that the image is changing. This URL is changing, and so on. Cool. So I guess let's do this. Have a function. Have a function that has all the dog breeds. That basically will make a net request to get all the dog breeds, and I also have a select box in your component with no options at the beginning. But when the net request arrives, you save those options, you save those breeds to the state, and inside of your select, then you will map your breeds to option tags, to option elements. So maybe let's take like 15 minutes to do that with that general description. Just try to investigate further, ask questions, and try it out. So the first thing that we want is just a select box that includes all the dog breeds. Don't even worry about how to handle different selection when the user select. Just try to get a select box that has all the breeds. without the.
without like a separate component, or with
Let's have it in this same component without a separate component.
use a query selector? I'm trying to figure out how to target this is necessary. Like, so, like, I don't know how to get on that side.
So you do it through the loop set state render file. So you can get that reads will set the state, should set the state with a list of reads. When you render, you can access that list and loop to create an option for every read, new list of reads. So it's sort of like it's the same sort of loop of how we get the new image source to apply to the image. Because when we get a new image, we set the state, the URL saving the state, and then render is calling in, and render can use the new URL.
So it should be happening inside of the render.
The loop can happen inside the render, or even a function that you call inside of the render. Oh, Mike, don't add it just yet. Don't add it just yet.
So let's do maybe on a scale 0 to 5 with your hand, where 5 is you are done and you have a list showing up, and 0 is you haven't even started because maybe you don't know where to start. Where are we? Like, cool. 4. some 4s, 3s. Okay. Let's do maybe like 5 more minutes, and then we can see it here for all.
This is not used to student components. So I'm trying to get everything here. Reads, information is here. And there. This wouldn't be that, just right. What should it be? It should, so you're seeing the list, right? I'm not seeing anything. There's 61 and stuff. Yeah, it doesn't seem this function. Right, so that probably should be because this is not right. It says that that is not a function. Is because that unworks the place. So it should be an array. So make sure that you store it as empty array underscore. Yeah. It works, well, it breaks down so it goes to the first step. Okay, so, right, so it goes to the first, so then I think what's going on is that we get this. I don't think this also overlaps. Okay. So that's not a right. Yeah, because the rectangles are another array of elements.
cells. So that gives you breed and numbers of the cell. Maybe you want the cell breeds and it comes to only here. This is one of the.
Okay, so how do we do this? So we want a select box that has as many options as breeds in the dog API. So what were some of the steps that people took for that? Douglas.
At least for what I was getting to, I created a get dog breeds function to make a network request.
That sounds reasonable. Let's do that here. Get dog breeds. Okay. Yes, tell us more about that.
I had set mine up as asynchronous, but
Uh-huh.
I first defined the specific. I went to the documentation. I got the specific URL that gets all of the breeds at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I parked that into a variable, which I call dog breed API URL.
Okay. Do a URL. And I guess maybe let me see if I can find it here. What? I think it's is this exact same thing? Maybe breeds.
List all at the end, so it's API/breed/ yeah. Actually, instead of swap out image random to breeds. This is list all.
List dash all.
Yeah.
Cool. So we got a URL. Oh, let's write this in ES6. So cool. So we have the URL, and yes, tell us more about like what this function will do.
So it makes its access request.
Mhm.
I'm trying to. So I try. So my try is putting a constant for response to equal the await axios.get breeds API URL. Then I'm putting all of that response into a data. So data equals response.data.
Okay.
And then I make another one just so it's easier for me to iterate over, which is types of dog. So I make const types of dog equals data.message. Because that gives it all of the breeds are in the message.
I see. Actually, maybe do you want to put your code in here? Are you connected?
I'm not.
Okay.
But
So
I can try. I'm having trouble connecting to those.
did you log in with your GitHub account?
I had, but it was just telling me it won't launch. Let me try one time.
Mm-hmm.
That's it should restart.
Oh, I see you joined.
Okay, so
Maybe like
where can I put this? I'm going to put it just below what you started writing.
okay.
This is what
So this is your get dog breeds.
this is what I ended up writing.
Cool. Let's look at this. I'm gonna get rid of what I wrote. Cool. So let's look at what Douglas has here. We have the URL. We just make a network request with Axios to get all the breeds, which you call that response. And you have response, a variable data that is going to have the data, and then you have types of dogs, data that message. Yeah, this is fine. And then you say console log types of dog.
So it's going to try to iterate inside of there. Now, that was not necessary stuff in this.
Okay. This is actually an interesting problem because types of dog, or whatever you call here types of dog, which is basically just data.message, is an object. But let's look at this. So when do we want to get all the dog breeds? At what point in time? Hugo?
Well, for mine, I put it where the component mounts.
When the component mounts, right? Because we want, as soon as the user comes to our app, to have the dog breeds, basically. Get dog breeds. So I put that in component in mount. And let's go here. Oops, index. I guess I just have an error here. So somebody remove the export default on app.js. Please don't do that. It was one of these three people: Cameron, Brianna, or Bonil. Attempt to import the export default app. Get rid of this.
It may also be on the export. So also I had to make something like state. Otherwise, that might be.
Wait, let's see why this is. This closes here. Component in mount. Get the breeds. Field select.
I didn't finish making that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
All that did was iterate over to show me that I could get the.
Got it. You have the render. Source index.js. Oh wait, let's see. Export default app. Huh. Import app from app. Class app. No, anyone see why we have this error? Let's see, maybe kill this and npm start. Export default app. Oh, I guess it's higher up. Got it. So it's
Yeah, that was
0.
yeah.
That's fine.
I was trying to figure out what it is.
Cool. Let's just see. Do we have a console log? I think we have a console log. Oh, also, you can ignore this this warning that you may be getting about a cookie associated with a cross-site resource doc.co, a set without same-site attribute. This is some sort of security measure that in the future, Google won't let a site set a cookie if they don't have a same-site attribute on the headers. But this is part of this is the dog's API responsibility to sort of conform to the standard. And I guess it's kind of hard to see with those. Types of dog, cool. So these types of dog, this is what we got from the network request, and we see that this is an object. You might see it in the object, you might see the curly brackets. In my case, it literally tells me that it's an object that has this many properties, this many keys. Cool, so that's one sort of like thing that we have to watch out for. I saw some of you trying to map over an object, then like breeze that map, and we can't really map over the object. We could loop with one of the loops that we have for in the loop for objects, and for each key then create an option. We could also take advantage, if you remember, this was probably like unit 1, object.keys, that you give in an object to object.keys and it returns to you an array with all the keys, basically.
So that like parked in a variable, so like
Mm-hmm.
reads equals object.keys.
Right. Let's look at here at the the component state as we go on app. We see that we have breeds, and breeds is this object, right? An object that has all these breeds as keys. So from here, what we need to do is one of those two options. One, turn this object into an array where all the keys become elements in the array, or just loop over the object with a for in loop, and for each one create, for each key create an option. I will say, let's just turn, let's just make use of object.keys. This is something that we don't get to use that often. But the idea of the loop should also just not surprise us. So in this case, what we can do here is to type dogs. What I'm going to do is object capital O.keys. This is a function that takes in an object and it returns to you an array with all its keys. And so I save that. Now let's inspect our state. Now we see that breeds is an array. And the first element is this thing that I don't even try to pronounce. The second one is African, Iredale, Akita, and so on. But now we turn sort of that array, that object, we turn its keys into an array, basically, with object.keys, data.message. Object.keys, data.message, that you just pass to object.keys, you just pass any object, and it'll return to you an array with all its keys. Cool, so that's the first thing that we want to do. Any questions about this function? To get the dog breeds? Yep.
So you can do something like object.keys inside the state, the set state, right?
Instead of set state, here, we could have done it here. Where do object.keys. Yeah. I'm going to change this from types of dog to all. Oops. This is all breeds. Cool. So we get our breeds on stage. Maybe Hugo, could you show us the function that you call populate select? Maybe put it up here on like line 53. Yeah. So the next step is, okay, cool. We have this array in our state that has all the breeds. From this array, we want to create options to display to the user, so the user is able to display. And I really like Hugo's approach with especially the name populate select. So let's look at what he has here.
See, mine is a little different because it uses the
Oh,
It's an object instead of an
I
array.
see. Okay, that's fine. So you didn't convert the object to the array, which is fine, as you know, as long as you are aware of the two approaches. I think there is no one better than the other. Um, cool. So actually, let's just then get. Actually, no. This is a good example for. So this is what the loop. If we don't do object.keys, this is how we could do it on. As Hubel has it. Basically, he brings in the breeds from state. He has a breed array, and he loops over every breed in the breeds array. And for each one of those, is pushing an option tag to the breed array. So this, I'll call this one like options or breed options. But this will be, oops, I forgot to change it somewhere. Options. But this again will be if we don't convert it from the object to an array of its keys, which is fine. But this is good to people to see this other approach as well. In fact, like, yeah, this will work if I get rid of the object.keys. Will work also just fine.
I can change it.
Cool, yeah, so how would we do it? Yeah, let's change it. Let's say we want to use the array that we now have. So we have a breed stat for each. Cool. One parenthesis, and you just changed it from the loop that was looping over the keys to a for each loop that is using the array. This is a fine approach with the for each. I'll say, like, in this case, I will prefer the map because we could do it like at once without having to need the array, this array. And then once we do like the map, we could also just do it on the render. But let's see this working first, and then we can see that other method. So populate select, and what we have here at the bottom is then let's do this. Let's do a select here, select box. And here we have this function, Hubel's function, populate select. What it does is it loops over all the options, it loops over all the breeds, and for each breed, is creating an option element, and is pushing that option element to the breed options array. Now, to React, you could just give an array of React elements, like options are React elements, and React knows how to render an array of React elements. Know what happens here if we do, so for instance, we can't do this. We can't do, let's bring in the breeds here from state. Can't do this, just breeds here. Oh, I was expecting this to break. But anyway, we put the breeds and nothing really appears. This is because React doesn't know how to show just raw information like an array. An array of values doesn't know how to show it. It will need to be an array of React elements. Now, our populate select returns just that. It returns an array of React elements. It returns an array of options. So here, let's call our function this that populate select. And then we get an error. We get breeds for each is not a function. When is it that you get this kind of error? Whatever is not a function. Dot whatever is not a function. There is a scenario where you always get these kind of errors. It can be map, it can be for each, it can be filter. The next. When it's not an array. When the thing before the dot is not an array, that's when you get this kind of error. So at some point in our code, we are assuming, the developers are assuming that this is going to be an array, but it's not. And then in here, it's just about checking our assumptions. Where is it that we believe that it was an array, and why is it an array? And here, I think we see, well, on this case, anybody knows exactly like why we're getting this error? Like why isn't it an array? Say that again? That's close, but we turn all breeds, we are getting all the keys from that object, from data.message. So in here, all breeds is an array. Joy? No, it's not a promise. Look at your state. And look at my state. Cameron?
Yeah, when it starts off, it's not an array, it's, and it renders the first time as a string.
Right, so we're starting with an empty string. An empty string doesn't have for each, or map, or reduce, or filter, or any of the array methods. Well, it has some, like includes. But in here, I need to start, this is breaking because we start with an empty string. The component mounts, it renders for the first time, and when it's rendering for the first time, it's trying to do for each on this empty string. And it just can't do for each on an empty string. So we need to start this one with an empty array. We can do for each on an empty array. And then here we get now our select, which has a few dozen elements. And from here, we're going to grab this. We're going to be listening for a change on the select, save that to the state. And then when we click on new dog, we're going to get a dog by this specific breed instead of just a random dog. But let's leave that for after we come from lunch. Yes, final question.
Can you scroll back to where you have
The options? The options is this code here, populate select. Once we come back, we can see another way in which we could do this with map. Yeah. Yep.
Listen, well, I don't know if you can do this, but I can't select anything in that select box.
I think it's because you have set the value on the select. We're going to do that after.
Bring back an array of option tags. How does that get turned into this? What kind of notes like take that array? Is there a step that's happening in translation?
The government wants to
still get the same. Like, oh, it is. This is weird. I think it might be like this might be fruit sandwich. Because I have seen it, but it's I don't even remember where it was last time. You have console watch somewhere? Oh, there's a bunch of things. Yeah, but if you find that right, so right. Yeah, okay. So the problem is the on-chain works. It's just that React doesn't like you looking at the event because you want to do like disable. Oh, you do the vibe? Oh, good. Well, so you just do eat that target that live. So it's weird because eat that target that live you can access without all you do here. There might be just some properties that react. You were trying to get to the value through the event.
Yeah, I was trying to see it first.
Yeah. That's. So the idea is just some properties that react warns you about accessing. For some reason, yeah, this is one of the caveats of Sandbox. This is very likely because you have an import storage. So we will save this file. Save it.
Show us the stuff.
That's fine. Also change this because access is not possible. I don't think that is so much.
It's just that you show us this on values actually is what close is.
Oh,
So I'm going to make clear this is this. Okay, those two.
we're not going to use access. We're going to get rid of it. Let's say forward.
Unless you get a slash on it. You might use slash. I don't know that you get it.
Are you guys ready now? But it says the error was thrown in but it is, wait, was it app or down? Scroll all the way down.
Says, you have error from order.
responding to it as a yes. So it might be
No, okay, because down here you're supposed to call the function, not put the thing, because that's what you're returning.
So I think it is done. It is done.
It doesn't have to.
Okay, so it is. You mean like the first anti-option? Yeah, the first anti-option is
I did subgroups to it.
What?
I did subgroups to it.
This one? The second one?
Yeah. Oh, the first one.
Cool. How do you do that?
I did a nested. It's in a different file. I think it's in that one. Yeah. So I did like I set the
That.
easy to message, and then right here I iterate through object keys.
And how do you make it like nested?
Nested opgroup.
Cool. Yeah.
So, and then the first option is the breed itself. I don't know how to get it, so you can use it.
Like, what happens if you set this one? What happens if you just don't set this one?
And you can't select the you can't select like bullhound or like bulldog. You have to select one of the sub options.
I see what you're saying. Oh, but it is kind of duplicate though.
I wish there was a way that you can actually have it as an option.
Uh-huh.
Can you do an option within an option?
I think maybe it's likely.
So change opt group to option.
No, it doesn't show. I think it will be about.
Probably turn it on. It's probably disabled by default.
To what?
I'm sure there's a way to do it. But
It's not how you make it disabled.
How to make it disable?
Yeah. Instead of making it disabled, you just the property.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably by default. It's true. You guys are default.
Let's look at outgroup. So I think you can't really put it as
Try to make it disabled false. Probably not disabled.
like here.
Yeah. It's false.
I don't think this is gonna work, but let's try it out. Yeah, I guess it's not really possible. What you probably have, like in this case, if you wanna select from the main ones, you'll probably just have another select.
yeah, there's another option.
Or I guess I was thinking that what you could do is you could do maybe fake nesting, where you do. Or where you just indent it, like with two spaces. It will be basically, I guess, like this. Wait.
Yeah, we should go like that. And then here you can do it. So put some space in it.
But wait, now this is telling me that it's not correct.
You need two options.
Oh, because if I'm here, I won't need this.
You need two options. It's a wrapper everything option.
No, leave the first one. This one, leave that one open.
This one?
The one that option.
This one?
Yeah.
No, this is.
Yeah, and then.
No, isn't this one?
You see the map.
No, and then you can nest this one, and then indent that.
You don't need to nest it.
And then indent this right here. Like next to sub.
But I'll need to close this with something else. Wait, what was this option?
Wait, this is nested already?
So if it's this, then return that option. Otherwise, just map. This has to return an array. So I think just this. And then this. Oh wait, what's this? Oh, this is the value.
But then you won't get the
It's not gonna work because it's a nested array. It'll be a nested array.
And this has to be returned wrapped in something. That's what you're saying. Let's try this.
It's gonna break.
Nothing. This is.
Oh, I have an idea.
Oh, right. It's because it's gonna be a nested array, and
It'll be
you
nested.
can't really be a nested array.
Your if statement. If it's nested, then you have to indent.
Yes, and then we won't be able to actually use map for this. For this, a recursive function will be cool. A recursive function that just goes.
You could you can actually concat. Every time you have a nested array, you can just concat.
Oh yeah. But we still need an extra variable then.
Yeah, you still have to alter a little bit.
So when this is like.
Oh, I have an idea.
No, you don't.
Yeah,
okay. So, this is gonna be kind of come.
Because React doesn't. I guess React doesn't know how to render nested.
Okay, so instead
Oh.
of giving it a label, we
Oh yeah.
move the label,
That's it.
and then we move this right there.
Oh, but then
Oh, what did I do?
open the terminal. No, but this is not gonna work because it's returning two
You return
things.
two things. You gotta always return one thing.
Oh, can you just wrap it in an empty thing?
Like a div.
No, like a
Fragment.
yeah. Mhm.
Nah, it's breaking me right now.
That's something.
Why don't you just take out the option? The blank option.
Wait, this one, yeah. What?
What was
Well, that way we get to select it. So we
the
can't
blank
select.
the blank is up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because it doesn't have the label. Wait, so what is this option?
That's the breed that has
Oh, that's
sub-options.
the main breed.
Yeah. The parent.
Instead of the op group, just put a fragment. No.
Here?
Yeah, just turn it to a fragment.
No, but then that's just gonna give you all the subbreeds. How you gonna?
Not really.
Yeah, you see, so you got like scroll up to like bulldog. You see, you got bulldog, and then right under it,
Now
those
you
are
just gotta put the indent. Now you put the indent right there. Yeah,
Here?
I don't think the indent
right before
works.
right before
Because the value, that's the other one is the value. Like here.
Yeah, now it works.
Maybe it will work now. Let's see.
Now it worked. Oh, it doesn't show it.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It
saying.
trims it. It trims it.
You have
Trims
to
the
put like a symbol.
Or maybe we could just put like sub plus breed. So it'll say like French bulldog or something.
Yeah.
So now it works.
This, but then, this looks really weird.
Oh, that's better. Nice.